Welcome to the Close to Home podcast. Real people, real life, real stories. Insight and inspiration from Close to Home brings a fresh perspective on home, business, and life. Join the professionals across real estate, construction, insurance, and financial lending to gain perspective not only from their individual professional experience, but also from their life stories. I'm here with my co-hosts, Jim, Jaclyn, and Ashley. Jaclyn, how was your morning? Good morning. How are you?
Yeah, doing well, Dan. How are you?
I'm doing great. Ashley, how are you?
Everything's going really well. Business is good. Kids are good. Family's good. So
Perfect. Good morning, Jim. How are you?
Just fine. Everything's looking good.
Perfect. Well, today, what we want to talk about, our daily topic, is what is your why? Jim, I think you've had some really good insight. We've had a little conversation here. What do we want to talk about today?
We want to talk about things that impact our lives, how we should be living them, and what our future looks like. So we want to talk a little bit about goals, how to achieve them, and how it's a different course for everybody.
So just because somebody's in one place doesn't mean they can't get to the other? Is that what you're telling me?
And I'm saying that there are several recipes, and the results are good, and they're all different.
Ashley, what are your thoughts on that?
for us, it's all about helping our customers and helping people achieve better quality of life. And sometimes that means, in our instance, helping them renovate a home. It means helping them create a space that allows them to have better quality family time. And that's really my why is I love to help people. And I think that everyone here at the table kind of feels the same way. Helping people is very powerful, and it's kind of, I believe, what we were put on this earth for, is to help each other out.
Yeah, so obviously we all have our lives, we have our concerns, we have the things that keep us up at night, we have our goals, and it is unique to each of us. It is unique in every aspect of life, and what may have been where you wanted or ideas that you had 10 years ago could be different today. And for me personally, when I'm helping people with their insurance, we're talking about those fears. What do we need to protect against? But we're also talking about, what goals do you have? For me, nobody likes insurance.
Oh, come on. It's an extremely important part of our lives, though, right?
It is. But my biggest difference, and especially what we're trying to do with the agency, is really turn people onto the, no pun intended, but the bright side of insurance, the positive aspect of that. And that's a huge why for what we do and how we try and position ourselves and how we, like Ashley said, help our clients.
Sure. You're making a necessity as pleasant as it can possibly be, and that's pretty important. I think that's what we're all looking for. So on the show, we're going to talk about things here that are possibilities, things that people don't know, ways to get there that you hadn't thought of before. These are important topics. They can change your life. They will change your life. Dan,
Jim,
tell us a little bit about you.
Well, I've been in the real estate industry for a little while, and broker in Illinois, agent in Missouri, auctioneer in both states. And for me, most of what I do is rural real estate, homes and acreage, farms, investments, 1031 exchanges. But, it's always about helping people improve the position that they're in. So even if it's, somebody who's done a dozen 1031 exchanges and bought and sold farms for a while, get them that next dream farm that they want. Or it could be somebody who's living in an apartment and they've rented for 10 years and they're finally in a position that they can own their own home. It's kind of a neat gig that I've got because I'm in a position to be able to see people where they are and take them where they want to go with everybody else's help.
I've got some good questions up and coming for you, especially regarding the 1031 exchange.
Yeah, it's a neat program.
Then we want to talk to you about how to get people started earlier. And we want to talk about how you can get the actual home that you want a little bit earlier. So we want to make sure everybody's on some sort of path that's personal to them, not one that's just put together by somebody, you've heard. Look, there's a lot of people who are going to be able to contradict some of the things that we say. Here's the part that you need to remember. Your goals are going to be different than everybody else's. So we're going to hit some controversial points where this might not mesh with your financial planner. However, this may change the way that you think. And as long as you know that they're all right as well, but I think we pride ourselves here on being the best. So let's think about that.
Absolutely. And, not all the financial gurus may be aligned with what each individual person says either. So,
Or what they're going through.
yeah.
Yeah, very true.
Exactly.
I think that, like Jim said, there's a path for everyone, and armoring yourself with as much knowledge about the topic as possible, especially in this path that each one of us kind of has a touch point on it, in this path of navigating home, navigating property ownership, navigating just life in general with your family, and trying to create a life that gives wealth of financials, wealth of good relationships, and wealth of, just quality time. And each one of us, I feel like, has a bit of knowledge that we can share, and we can kind of guide people. Like you said, doesn't mean that all of our opinions are the right opinions for each individual, but in the global scheme of things, that's why we're all here. We want to share, we want to help people, we want to give back to kind of how we can aid them in that next step in life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
Speaking of wealth, Jim, we didn't get your plug. What's your take on that?
A lot of how to, it's such a broad spectrum when it comes to finance. And most of what I would be talking about is more so than investing, which real estate is usually people's largest investment. Now, there's a few elite where it's a little bit different, but could you imagine stepping back a few years? And some of you are young. I'm obviously the granddaddy in here, but basically, had I known back when, what if you could look back,
Sure.
which everybody, obviously you look back, hey, I may have taken a different route or something to that effect. But what we want to show people is how to make best use of your time, how to maybe get into the home early. Look, if you can't get into one, in 6 months, maybe 12 months, maybe a year, maybe 2 years. Okay, let's keep our goals realistic. Maybe you've got some credit card debt. We're going to talk about that. But we're going to talk about bigger things than that. We're going to talk about your quality of life, how to get there, how to do it reasonably. What we want to do is we want to have, a situation where you're not living completely for tomorrow, but you're also not living completely for today. In other words, most of us have families, and so we're kind of dragging them along through this. So our decisions are big. You got to be prudent. So we're going to talk about things that people don't even know you can do. If you, for instance, you find a house and it would be perfect, but it needs this or this, we're going to talk about how you can do that with the same amount of funds as somebody who's just buying a house. We're going to talk about how to get, debt ratios in alignment, how to get the best policies for your insurance.
And what policies and what coverage?
Oh my gosh, yeah, those are big questions I have for Jaclyn later. We'll interrogate her hard.
Looking forward to it.
But that's the scheme of things. And I think Ashley mentioned, our objective is to get the wheels turning. So if you're thinking and you set some goals, it's okay. You have to have goals. But you also have to remember to keep moving toward them. It's okay to change your mind. And this is where everybody gets a little bit sidestepped. Don't worry about it.
Well, I think we have to remember that it's better to move forward than to be perfect out the gate. So, again, you're going to have like Jim said, your goals, but it's okay if, you get a hiccup along the way. There's ways to maneuver around it. And if the journey looks a little bit different than it did the day before, that's okay, because hopefully through all of our discussions, and like Ashley said, with just pulling in a bunch of knowledge, you'll know how to pivot and still hit those goals, just maybe in a different way. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Just being open, because I know that as our business has almost taken on its own being, its own entity, like you have less and less control the more you grow through life. Right. And being the baby in the group, I think
that's safe.
Am I the baby in the group?
I don't know.
All right, let's have it.
Yes, she is.
31.
Yeah, dang it.
But I'm realizing very quickly that the less control, but the more that's okay. And the more you deal with what you have in front of you today and focusing on tomorrow, that's where your goals are, right? But focusing on the right now, and then also taking time to focus on your goals and kind of, like you said, pivot, deal with what comes. And the more I get to know Jim and just his wealth of knowledge with, just living every day, money comes and goes, people come and go, but our self and our individuality doesn't. So that's really kind of where I see my focus coming in 2023.
One thing that I've learned from Jim is take time to smell the roses, and still try to do 1%, be 1% better today than I was yesterday.
Oh my gosh,
And
that's
1%
huge.
better
Pretty
tomorrow than I
inspiring.
am today.
This sounds like my diet. Everybody thinks I'm crazy. I want to lose 1 pound a week, right?
Yeah.
They're like, isn't that taking it a little easy on yourself? I'm like, there's 52 weeks in a year, dude.
Yeah.
Right.
Eat the elephant one bite at a time.
Exactly.
Right.
And we're going to have some shocking stuff here that people didn't realize you can do. And it's all interesting. So I think we should move right in.
Let's do it. Well, guys, let's do it. So, Jaclyn, you recently took a pretty big leap of faith, right?
I did, yeah. Starting my own insurance agency. Pretty big leap.
I would say so.
Give us a little bit of the woes, like step back when you were considering it. Let's go that far back. And so you're working at your old company.
Yeah, so this is a pretty deep story. So hang on. We actually had a pretty tragic loss in our family about 1.5 years ago. And when you go through anything, when anybody goes through anything tragic, you start to reassess values. Like, why do I wake up every morning and do what I do? And for whatever reason, at that point in my life, I didn't feel like I was fulfilling what I was supposed to do. And so going through grief counseling after losing our son, I realized that I didn't fit in the model of the corporation that I worked for any longer. It was very high pressure, push through, care about your clients for a year and move on to the next. And it was, at that point in life, I couldn't do that anymore. Now, was I scared, completely scared to literally start over? Because that's what you have to do. I mean, when you're in industries, you have to, you can't just take your clients with you. So there was a lot of, I'm moving forward, I can't. I'm moving forward, I can't. And finally, I had to be true to myself.
Was there anything within there that actually, how do I say, pushed you over the edge? It's like, okay, this is happening. What was
the breaking point?
Yeah, because, I mean, obviously you're going through some traumatic stuff, but.
Or the breakthrough. What was the breakthrough?
I think the biggest thing was I knew I had a partner that was going to do, be along this journey with me. And I would also say my husband's support. He said,
huge.
I just want you to be happy like I am. And if that's what this takes, we'll figure out the financial part of it. And a step back doesn't mean a true step back.
Right.
So
Sometimes it means a step out.
Or a step to the side, before you can get your forward momentum.
Right. Or a half step.
The steps backwards are tough situations. So do we want to elaborate a little bit more on your tragic portion? Do you want to make mention?
Yeah. So back in August, well, we can take it back a little bit further. So my stepson joined the military back in July of 2019, and super, super proud of him. And, obviously this all happened shortly after COVID. He was locked up at Pendleton, and we didn't get to see him, for well over a year due to COVID. And finally he got to come home. They deployed him and his battalion to Jordan. And then as as everything happened in Afghanistan, with the withdrawal, Biden had to send extra troops, and Jared was right. I mean, he was there. He was in Jordan. He wasn't too far, and their group got sent, and it was really hard. And I just remember, like, Mark and I both had COVID at that point, and so we were just already down and out. And I just remember the news breaking, and my husband was just so sure that Jared didn't make it. And I was trying so hard to reassure him. It's fine. He called us and told us he was moving to the airstrip. Like, he's fine. He's out of the way of danger. And then that knock on the door came that morning, and life has ever changed since then. So it's it's
a pivot.
It's yeah.
Those are the moments that you can't explain those away. You can't, they're never, the emotion, nothing is going to make it better. And those are the moments where you want to be surrounded by friends, by family that you know you can count on.
And luckily we were. I've got to say that's the only thing that got our family through. There was so much community support. There was so much support from friends and family and like-minded people. It was what got us through every day.
I'm not even going to pretend that I could even begin to understand what one goes through with that. I mean, I have an only son, and it's hard to even
fathom.
Yeah, I'm not going to pretend that I can. But nonetheless, it is a story that I feel you're gracious to share, because it can't be easy ever. And it was more on the famous side, where it had a lot more recognition than many, so that wound continually gets salted.
That was harder for me, easier for my husband. It's really weird how you figure out how you grieve. The publicity helped Mark feel comforted. And for me, it was something I just wanted to shy away from. I'm a much more private person than my husband. So it was really hard at first. And I just remember feeling like I got this overnight fame that wasn't positive. And it was really, really hard to go to the grocery store to talk about anything, because everything was wrapped in this event. It was hard for my children, still is. So everybody has their things. Everybody has their tragedies. Everybody has something that they're going through. And it's just different. And you just have to be willing to sometimes be an ear for somebody, because that's all they need.
Well, you are definitely one of those, as I've found with our outside endeavors amongst the others in the room, that are very giving people and take it very seriously. You know, when helping others, it was probably a blessing in your endeavors to open up Brightside, because you had the opportunity to be busy, you know, while you're trying to sort through the unknown. You know, I mean, it's something I can't imagine or fathom, but I would have to have a go-to for my mind, because it will eat me alive, you know?
That was exactly what it was. I feel like, our family is a very faithful family, and I feel like God gave me a lot of strength. He taught me a lot about myself through all of the tragedy. And I did at some point have this overwhelming amount of strength that just catapulted me to, I mean, what else could go wrong? So why not take the leap of faith? I don't know. That's probably a crazy mindset.
When you feel that dip in your life, I don't want to say low because I don't like the word low. I don't know why. I just feel like when you hit that level, it sounds a little cheesy, but you can only go up from there, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and it's the upswing where you put in the work, you put in, and you almost have this built up energy. Like people feel like from the top, like, oh, there's this energy to like go, go, go. But like when you hit rock bottom and you know that like you almost store this energy and you have the opportunity to either sit there and just
sulk in it.
Yeah.
Or do something.
Or you can do something with it. And both you and your husband have in your own way. Mm-hmm. I mean, Mark has a not-for-profit now, and he has put his heart and soul in it. And I know that with Brightside, if you haven't sat down with Jaclyn, you ought to, because she puts her heart and soul into every meeting with her clients. And I never knew half the things I know about insurance now, but I do, because you are running full steam towards this new goal and new insight on life, and it's inspiring for me.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm also pretty good about getting the detailed points out that not everybody does that. When you're shopping a policy or any of that, but
well, I can tell you this. I still don't know anything about insurance, and Jaclyn's been my agent for a long time. But whenever I sit down, if I'm at a place where I need to sit down with her and she's like, oh, okay, well, we've got, some sort of a tangible asset here that we need to actually take care of. Let's have a meeting versus, hey, Jaclyn, we bought a different car. Just take care of it, whatever it is. I just know there's that trust there that I don't have to worry about it too.
Absolutely.
So I really don't need to know anything about insurance because I've got my own Jaclyn.
Yeah.
that's a good point.
But
we'll fix that.
It takes time to get there.
Yeah.
So not everybody's going to trust me off the bat. So
If you tune into a few more episodes, Dan, you're gonna know a little bit
You're gonna
more
know.
about it. So we'll get you up to speed.
Yeah, for sure.
Who else wants to give some details
Give
on
give
their
some
life?
deets.
Some deets.
Well, Jim, I think that you've been in the industry for how long?
Quite a while. I think we're pushing 34 years in the industry. So if that's any indication of the
34.
age, that's a little bit more years than I think a couple of the people at the table have.
My goodness.
Well, I know in chatting with you, Jim, you've had a lot of personal and professional life lessons along the way. And as we know, sometimes we grow most from, I don't want to call them failures, but things that didn't go quite as planned where we've had to pivot. Do you want to share some of that with us?
I will share some of that with you, and I'll tell you something. It seems like a drop in the bucket after having heard what you've been through, and I know many people have been through that. But so for me, it's kind of an incredible situation where you get your goals set, you start working and doing things. I'm one of those people who have had about 4 businesses, each successively, a little bit better each time that I've done it. And so I used to have a company called Missouri Mortgage Savings, and it grew rather quickly. And we did have the personal touch. And we used to bombard everybody's mailboxes. And if you're a little older than Dan and Ashley, you've probably seen some of that propaganda. However, I want to say about 2008, 2009, and I know I'm not alone in this. I mean, everybody's got a story, but real estate took a dip.
Oh, yeah.
And
High school was a drag.
Understatement.
and maybe some of the parents felt it. All right, guys. Did I say it was easier? No, this is a little harder than I thought.
Yeah.
No, honestly, most of the decisions that you make, you've got a good background in the industry. You've got a decent board of directors. You've got, a financial person, and you're going on all this advice, and you're trusting everybody. But there's one factor here, and this is nobody's fault. It's not the financial guy's fault. It's not the board's fault. It's basically there's a third party here, which is, the economy. And it's a difficult thing. And so, I think back in 2008, 2009, there was about 13,000, maybe almost 14,000 banks in the U.S. And I want to say by 2010, there was approximately 4,000 to 6,000 banks in the U.S., and coincidentally, this is very interesting, but 60% of those banks are in Missouri and Illinois.
Really?
Yeah, which is
didn't
very,
know that.
very interesting. So at the time, we were a mortgage banker versus a broker. So we did not do standard checkings and savings or anything like that. However, we did mortgage banking. Well, it got a little bit tough. Values fell. People are walking away from their houses, and we're basically selling these loans off. Well, you wake up one day and you've got about 3 or 4 buybacks on your desk. That's a couple $1 million that are due and payable now. Well, we'll service these things for about 6 months, send them along, and then they'll be seasoned, then sell them. Just kept piling up, and nobody wanted to buy anything, as far as loans and all that. Well, okay, it's time to look at what we have asset-wise and sell it. Well, none of the real estate's worth any money anymore. You listen to the financial advisor. Hey, put at least 15% down, so that if you got to dump these things quick, you can do it, right? Well, this was pre-economic breakdown. So, no, we'll do 30%. That way, if we have to flip them, we can, we've just got a little bit more equity in there. That'll be great. Little did I know I was going to lose everything. There's no equity, nowhere to turn, and, you've got this staff you've been running for, several years, and there's no real way out. What do you do? How much can you minimize? How can you do this? It was a rough fall. And I don't know if everybody knows this or not, but this is the hard part is, you're looking at the walls around you and you're thinking about your family. And it's like, I got to close this up. I got to figure out what to do with, and this is kind of the computer era, which was coming around. We still have paper files. And so there's offices, basically across the states. You got to figure out how to get all these wrapped up, closed up, destroy all this information. This is all so many people's personal information, and yet we're nearly penniless now. So the clock's ticking, and it gets to the point here where it's very, very humbling, where I'm not even eligible for unemployment. It's like, we got to figure something out here to feed the family. Well, luckily, there was a little bit of saving grace, because some of the family assisted at the bailout, but we had to close it up, completely bankrupt. Most humiliating thing in my life. Couldn't even look at myself in the mirror. I mean, it was just absolutely devastating. But I still had to figure out, I've got about 1.5 years in front of me with no income, to get all these offices cleaned up and get everything done. Stuff that people don't even really realize, but, all this information has to be tended to and destroyed. And I don't know if anybody's ever tried to get files destroyed, but it's not cheap either. I mean, the truck has to come up. You need a certificate of destruction, all this kind of stuff. Anyway, in the meantime, these bankruptcy attorneys are beating the tar out of you. And I mean, I'd thrown in the towel, give up. It's like, look, take whatever you want. I don't even care anymore. Just everybody do whatever you need to do. You get fed up, and it's like, well, we'll get this behind us and we'll reopen. Well, here's the good news. Okay. You have two choices. You can close up and take what you've got and get a little self-centered, or you can do it the right way. Make sure nobody gets stiffed. Make sure everybody gets what they're, intended to. Make sure all the clients were taken care of. We came out unscathed with that, so I could hit the pillow at night. But my family took it pretty much in the face, because that was the right way to do it for me. Otherwise, I could never sleep at night. So I figured that, well, no big deal. We'll get something fired up here again shortly. Couldn't do it. Once you have this bankruptcy on your record, people don't talk to you about it, but nobody's going to give you millions of dollars of lines of credit again to get going again. Can't buy a house. Everybody knows this. I'm in the financial industry. And so you have to reassess the situation, start your goals over, and then 7 years went by almost like a flash. I'm working for somebody else, and it's getting rough. And, I realized that all these other companies and banks are going through this too, because we would work for them. And then all of a sudden, hey, we're not closing loans anymore. We're not even doing loans anymore. I mean, these are big banks, and so off again we go. Man, my resume is looking good. I think I stopped at 7 different banks before, I found some footing. Okay, so 7 years comes around. All right, you know what? Let's get the shop back together. Let's put everything together. Well, no, you can't just do that. For the financial banking industry, it's a 10-year MAR on your record, not 7, So if you're applying for a mortgage and you're 7 years from your filing date, you don't really have to tack that or check that box. But in the financial world, in your backgrounds and everything else, you need 10 years. So we just kept facing knock after knock after knock. It was crazy. I do remember eventually we were able to get a house after a few years, and we closed on our loan, moved in. And I remember the bank, I don't want to say any names, but it's a rather large bank, said, hey, we just realized, that you were bankrupt, at this time, and we're calling your loan due. You gotta be kidding me. I was like, this loan is closed, so I will tell you, I was a little bit at that point. I knew enough. I was like, I'm sorry, boys. You just got a mortgage sandwich. We're not doing anything. And it did pan out, so they had to swallow. It's fine. But this was hard stuff. This was hard stuff, and it gets deeper than that and more specific, but I don't want to bore everybody. But it is one of those things where you think about things that you should not think about ever, and so.
But it sounds like even in adversity, your values were strong enough to do the right thing. And that's not easy. That's not easy when your family's in hardship, but you're still doing the right thing for the employees that you had, for all of your clients. And that's huge.
The family was the weight, because you have to stand by them. And, without them, it probably wouldn't have been a thing anyway. Who cares? But that was the big deal.
Right.
So it was both the double-edged sword, the saving grace and the, responsibility portion of it. And, when you look back, everybody always says this, it's going to get better, Help me out here. Does it get better? Of course it does. Of course it does. There's choices. They're not always the choices we want, but there are choices.
I think you hit the nail on the head with you have choices to make. Yeah. And that's pretty much the moral of my story too. You have choices to make.
Yeah. Run us through your story, Ashley.
Oh, my story?
Yeah.
Well, my story is not, is at this time in my life, it's not a story of being an adult and making adult decisions. It's about being a child and making adult decisions. My parents were divorced when I was younger, and ended up with my father with custody of 4 young girls, and which is kind of an unusual situation. So I'll spare you a lot of the details, but basically at 15 years old, I had a decision to make. I had choices to make. And that choice ended up being leaving my father's house with 2 black trash bags and walking away and never coming back. And there were just a lot of things about living with my father that were not good. He was not a good guy. And that was a choice that I made that I knew at 15 years old was going to make my life very, very difficult. I lost all of my college funding. I lost health insurance at 50. I lost basically in my entire family, other than my mother and my aunt. And I ended up working part-time through high school. I worked all the way through college. I used that low to fuel everything that I did as a young person. And I worked in a professional building at 16 years old doing administrative work and pushing my way through everything that I did. And that was just a really big turning point in my life where I realized that it's up to me if I'm going to be something. And I'll be darned if I'm going to let somebody like that impede or keep me from being successful in life. And I feel like people can utilize, who their parents were or how they grew up and place that to be who they end up being. But I firmly believe that we are a result of who we decide to be. And we wake up every day with that opportunity to be that 1% better or that 1%, pivot on where we want to be in life. And sometimes that means breaking away from people that you don't want to, especially parents or siblings. And those can be some of the most toxic people in your life. And toxicity in relationships is a real thing. It's a real impact. And you've got to step away from those people in order to be a better person sometimes. So that's mine.
That
Yeah.
would take a lot of strength. So I have to ask the question, like with Jaclyn, what pushed you over the edge with non-specifically where you got the strength to say, okay, I got to go be Ashley?
Yeah. I think just like you said, I wasn't allowed to be me. I wasn't allowed to be Ashley. I was a pawn, and that's not a good game to play. And if you know me well enough, you know that I'm a really, really nice person, but don't put me in a corner because I'm that cat that's going to come fighting with all sets of 4 claws. I'm not that person. Don't put me in a corner and push me because I'm not a nice person when that situation comes around. So
I think we know you well enough to know that's probably a truth.
yeah.
Well,
Dan,
do you,
come on now. There's a lot
Well-
I see 3 sets of eyes on you.
There's a lot of deep stuff that was just said, and my story's not anywhere near as deep as any 3 of you guys's.
Well, we'll be thankful for that.
Yeah, mine's pretty lighthearted. Mine was pretty lighthearted. So decided to get into the real estate industry probably 6 years ago or so, I think is when I got into there. And, just was working for somebody else, doing a pretty physical job. Had a couple injuries. Just really didn't like working for somebody else. And, really, I guess, knew that it was time to take my leap of faith, and had a very supportive girlfriend at the time who's now my wife and mother of my 1 kid and soon to be 2 kids. So, yeah, she was super supportive. She was running her own business. And just knew that I wanted to go.
And it's been smooth sailing ever since?
There's a couple of rocks in the road, but get over the humps and you just move along. Yeah, I mean,
Rocks or speed bumps?
both. Speed bumps, yeah. I mean,
Potholes.
Yeah, potholes. Sometimes the road turns left and you wind up in a ditch because you
But
keep going straight.
I mean, so obviously you got into real estate,
Yep.
but did you imagine 6 years ago that you would be with the brokerage that you are today and doing so much more?
I didn't. I just knew that at the time, hey, I was just tired of where I was and tired of getting beat up every day, and just said, hey, I just want to do this. And that kind of spawned one thing that kind of spawned another and led to another. And I don't think that I take the best out of every opportunity that's handed to me all the time looking back, but, I just try to do the best. At the time, I try to do the best with what I have in front of me. And, my grandpa was in business for himself, and he always said that the harder you work, the luckier you get. And
Luck, huh?
luck, yeah.
I like it. That's a good one.
So got lucky to bump into the right people along the way and work with some great folks, and wound up working with them from the other side of the table, and now we're on the same side of the table, and just built that relationship over time, and now we've got a couple other things that are in the works, and yeah.
Very exciting. I think you cut yourself a little too short. You are amazing, and it's not just luck. A lot of hard work. It's the way you build relationships.
I was going to say relationships
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah.
Dan, he's never happier when he's playing in the dirt. It's one of those things where, and True Blue, what you see is what you get. A lot of us have that here, and that's, I think, what established this group is. I was pretty excited about it, and this was months ago. And Ashley, of course, what do we call her? The
I think
spearhead,
she's the ringleader.
The
she was
ringleader.
the brains behind
She's
this
the one who's
initiative.
herding all the cats.
in a one-on-one, she made a suggestion like this, and it was almost in nonchalant, and then I ended up having a meeting with Jaclyn and Dan, and I mentioned what Ashley had said, and it was one of those things where, well, is this going to come true or not? Yes, no, maybe, but the interesting part is getting to know them as we work together. It's been pretty incredible, because in my industry, I shared a little bit with you about having the company and working for others. Okay. So let's be real here. The finance part's pretty boring, but the people are exceptional, and we all have that in common. We really do. So people can, sell you on a bill of goods that they care. But I'm telling you, somebody who divulges time to you, you don't realize how important time is. Everybody's running on a schedule, but when you work with these people and you find out they're giving you time, guys, that's the most precious commodity anybody can have.
100%.
Sure.
Agreed.
Because we're all flying through our days. I mean, it's hard for me sometimes to get to yesterday I called Ashley at 9:30 in the morning. I got my call back
He's
at
gonna rat
about
me out.
it must have been 4:30 or 5:30.
3:52.
Oh,
3:52.
boom. All right, I stand corrected. No, honestly, I know she's really busy, and that's why I texted nothing urgent, because I know how busy everybody is. When I work with Jaclyn, my emails don't even, they go to her junk folder.
No, not any longer. We fixed that.
And she keeps asking me for the same thing over and over. And I'm like, I'm just going to send it,
Did you give it to her the first time?
Yeah, of course I did. It's a resend. It was easy.
Nice.
No, honestly, it's really, really a neat effort. And that's why I'm saying, we can be a vehicle if we're a fit for you. This is a unique group, and you may not mesh with each of us individually, but I'm sure there's one or two of us you would mesh with. But this is a really unique group.
It is. And you know what? This is super exciting, I know, for all of us. And I can't wait to see what happens. Hopefully we can help at least one person along the way, and this whole thing would be worth it. So
Absolutely.
make sure that you guys, thanks for your time this week. Appreciate you guys watching or listening, wherever it is that you're picking up this media at. And be sure to like, follow, subscribe. Did I hit all the
Close to home.
close to home? Real people, real life, real stories. And we'll catch you next week.
See ya.
See you later.
So should we close with
Mr. Editor, the title of this week's podcast is The Importance of a Broker, or The Importance of an Insurance Broker.
There we go.
Correct? Is that how
Yes.
you want to go? Okay.
Yep.
Welcome to the Close to Home podcast. Real life, real people, real stories. Insight and inspiration from close to home brings a fresh perspective on home, business, and life. Join the professionals across real estate, construction, insurance, and financial lending to gain perspective not only from their individual and professional experiences, but also from their life stories. Well, good morning, guys.
Good morning,
morning.
Dan.
Morning. So I've got my co-hosts here, Jim, Jaclyn,
Good morning.
Ashley. How
Good
are you
morning.
guys?
Doing great.
Got some coffee this morning. Doing wonderful.
Awesome. Well, this week's a pretty important topic. Spotlight's going to be shining on Jaclyn, and we're going to be talking about the importance of the importance of having a broker when you get your insurance, right?
Yep, that's true.
So
Dan's going to learn all about insurance this week.
I am. All I know is that when you have assets, you need to insure them. Make sure that you're protected.
That's true.
So pretty high level, a lot of insight right there.
You're an expert already.
Boom. Got it.
In
He
apparel.
just knows Jaclyn's phone number. It's on
Very-
speed
that's-
dial.
that's
7:30
exactly
a.m.
how you do it.
every Tuesday and Thursday morning.
Well, anytime there's an incident, peril, or anything else, you want to be made whole again. That's why you paid your premium anyway, right?
100%.
So, all right, Jaclyn, you ready to take this away, or you want us to
Yep.
fire questions at you before you even start?
No. Hey, you guys feel free to interrupt. There's a lot to this. So first of all, let me kind of chat about what a broker is. So in insurance, you have agents that represent a particular company, and then you have brokers, which represent numerous companies. So that's probably one of the biggest benefits and importance in why you use a broker is the wide selection of options. So like in particular, every insurance company is going to have their niche. They're going to want young drivers or not want teenage drivers, or they, don't want elderly drivers, or if you have a single accident, they don't want you, or somebody who's like, yeah, we'll take up to 3 or 4 accidents, or we're going to rate accidents for 3 years versus 5 years. So there's a wide variety of, different, what they call rating factors. That's really more important for me to understand than the customer. But what they need to remember is that an insurance broker has a wide array of options. So like our agency specifically, so Brightside, on the personal lines, we have like 30 different companies that we can shop.
And that's as opposed to shopping one.
Correct.
Okay. So like that's
huge.
To me, that's a big difference.
It is.
So you're saying I don't have to call 30 different carriers to get a bed?
Exactly. So convenience is another reason why you want to use a broker, is because you have one conversation with me, and I'm going to dig in like we talked about in another episode. I want to understand your pain points. I want to understand what keeps you up at night. I want to understand your home or your auto or your past or your goals, so that I make sure that I'm representing your insurance. So I'm addressing your insurance goals, right? And protecting against those risks. But I get to do that at a baseline. So I take this information and then I shop all the carriers at the same coverage. I don't have to worry about like, well, this one's going to do this, and I put this one in different, and then I've got, this 800 number person calling me, and I've got this other agent from another company calling me, and all of a sudden your phone is bombarded and your email
Text
is
messages
flooded
and-
with quotes and everything looks the same,
But
but reality, it's not. there's numbers on insurance policies can look similar and be so different.
So is there like I think I know the answer to this question. Is there a perfect policy number, like this deductible, this, that, and whatever else that like other agencies will just kind of use as like a generic, and it's still not enough? Like, how do you know?
So you have to have conversations. So just like probably in your business, you're not telling somebody what they need. You're asking them questions. You're trying to understand what the goal of their kitchen or their bath is in order to actually make a remodeling recommendation, right?
Absolutely.
So the same goes for insurance. Like, I need to understand different things about your home. Like maybe you're buying a home and it's an older home. So we need to understand like what systems are in place, how new, how updated, because there could be potential risks if things aren't updated. And I want to know that so I can protect against that.
So like the difference when you say systems, do you mean like HVAC systems, or, hey, we've got, this home is built in the 50s and it's got aluminum wires, not copper?
Correct. I mean that, or I mean, even plumbing, there,
It's a lot of detail.
there's a lot. Roof is a big one, especially here in the Midwest. And sometimes there sometimes can be carriers that will not insure you if you're buying a house with a roof more than 15 years old. I mean, I have carriers that'll do that, but the majority of carriers will not.
And if they do, boom, it's up there.
It is. It's pricey. So, I mean, there's lots of things to consider when purchasing a home and understanding if you have old wiring or if you have older systems, or again, if there's been some history of water issues, like making sure that you've got water backup or you have service line coverage that covers the pipes underneath the house. I mean,
If they're in a flood zone.
if they're in a flood zone, some of the lending requirements will require you to hold flood insurance, and that can be pricey as well. And so, Jim, I know that sometimes you deal with people with all levels of credit, that can sometimes be a pain point, right?
It is. It absolutely is. And, the floodplain we run into a lot. So with every single application, you will have to have a flood determination, at which, one point they may be facing that.
Yeah. And if that's the case and they're already on a tight debt to income ratio,
That could be the difference.
that could be the difference. So
So you're telling me that we need to find a broker. And how does one go about? So in my mind, it's not so much knowing everything that you know, but finding people like you.
Right.
Or finding you or contacting you. How does one go about knowing if they're dealing with a broker or an agent? Like, is that a question that they can ask?
absolutely. Yeah. You can ask like, how many companies do you represent, or are you a captive company versus a broker? There are even captive companies that do some brokerage accounts, but it still benefits them to push their own main company.
Right.
So you just have to, I think the thing is you want to have somebody who works for you.
Mm-hmm.
They're not an employee of a specific insurance carrier.
Right.
So we are just outside of St. Louis. If we have somebody who's listening in, I don't know, Montana or Florida, what kind of questions should they be asking them? Whenever, like, what's the introductory question? Hey, how many people or how many different companies do you represent? But, what's next? If they say, hey, I represent 3, is there a difference in representing 3 versus 10 versus 30? I mean, I think I know the answer because you represent a lot. I don't know how many it is, but.
Yeah. So, we have about 30 different companies on the personal line side. You definitely want more than a couple.
Sure.
If that's going to be your one-stop shop, right? And that's ideally what we all hope for. And any traditional broker is going to have access to numerous.
Okay.
You may have captive companies that have partnerships or have spinoffs that they might be able to shop a couple extra companies, but they're still an employee of and representing an insurance company and an insurance company interest.
So let me ask you that. So if you're working for a larger company and whatnot, and so say they stray and they do what they call a broker, is it a situation where, people have to make money placing these policies, obviously, right? So wouldn't there be a little bit of a situation where that might work out just a little bit better in your category because you don't have to split?
Correct.
Am I saying this properly? Because I don't know insurance very well either. I just know for the way I talk, I need an umbrella policy because I'm going to get sued.
Good reference there. So are you talking about on the commission side, or are you talking about if somebody's got the client's truly best interest at heart because of the carriers that they may be swayed to put them with versus another?
Well,
Both?
I hadn't thought of that. I was just thinking it would cost them a little bit more to go out and do that because they have to split with a house.
No. So there's no, a client never pays more. Doesn't pay excess fees depending on where they go.
So if I work at company A and I say, okay, they're not fitting very well within my policy, but I do have this over here where I can send them here.
Right.
What I'm saying is if I send them here, I just didn't know if some of that's going to the captive house or not, versus if you just wrote them directly. That's what I was asking.
No. So, any companies that have any type of brokering options, those are negotiated on the back end. So that's more of a...
So back to Dan's question, which is basically, it doesn't matter where you are, you have to ask the right questions.
Yes. I would just ask, if you're a broker or if you're asking for advice, I would ideally like to work with an insurance broker. That way they're going to give you the best of what's pretty much in the market.
So establishing the trust is a big deal. Obviously, for me, that's what I'm pushing, and we've had the opportunity to do so. Not everybody can do that in a phone call, and so once that trust is earned, but I feel comfort. I'm one of those that review every year, and I recommend everybody review their insurance every year. And if you have one person that can run it by several situations and review your policy for you each year, that's a lot of time, a lot of work. I'm in.
It is, yeah. Probably the hardest part of my job is staying current with the ever-changing environment. So probably much like you and your business, we have to know our competition. For the 30 plus carriers that I'm writing for on the personal line side, I have to know when they make updates. I have to know when they've changed what their target market looks like. I have to know if there's any changes. We just had a carrier last fall that used to be one that would write roofs over 15 years. And literally I got up one morning and I went and did a quote, and they weren't an option anymore. So
Really?
Literally just like that.
I remember when you said that, and I was
Yes.
excited because that's a big deal.
Yeah. So, and again, you have to stay on top of the why. You have to you have to be an expert in your industry and with your carriers. So, that's a huge thing. And like you said, establishing the trust. Yes, you have to have a trusting relationship. You have to know that the person is always going to have your best interest at heart. When you work with a broker who doesn't matter if I put you with carrier A, C, X, Z, whatever, my goal is at every renewal, we will always place you with the best option.
Well, here's my trust established with Jaclyn. I've had the pleasure of working with her for a little bit here now. She is not afraid to deliver bad news. Now, if that doesn't earn you any trust, I don't know what does. But, you want it. We talked about this in other casts.
Yeah.
You want to have, somebody who can deliver the news, good, bad, or indifferent, because you want to make a good decision, the best decision that you can make, and I think that's been a highlight, and I wish everybody was like that. And now I'm not 100% sure out of the three of us here, I've had the opportunity, but Ashley seems like the straightest shooter of all of us, and I haven't had as much work yet with her, but we are establishing that. And so the other thing is the changes, updating. Come on, guys, all of us. The changes that we go through every year, it's like, they're doing what? They're doing what? Has anybody in their industry had anybody asking for less as far as compliance?
No.
I mean, come on, right?
Yeah.
One-
Talk about
it's-
government permits.
It's just never ending, and it just
More
keeps
and more
coming.
red tape.
Yeah, I mean,
for sure.
Even in joking, it's like, whose job here is easier than the other guys?
They're all difficult.
They all have, yeah.
Right.
I know that I wouldn't want to have the job of protecting somebody's assets and then wake up one day and, oh, hey, yeah. So even though we're supposed to close in 3 days, you can't get insured by this person because they don't have a roof that's newer than 15 years old.
What kind of, and then
That kind of blows my mind, honestly.
he has to go back to them.
So don't be afraid of that. There are a couple companies that will.
Okay. And
yeah.
so that's something like that happens, and then just a phone call to Jaclyn, right? And I mean, that's what I would do.
That's why
Call
we
this
always
person.
say
Yeah.
when
At 7:30 in the morning.
Eat the frog early.
That's right. That's right. That's where you gotta, Dan, I know you're really good about, people get under contract and you're like, hey, let's get that insurance figured out. Let's not wait. Granted, we're closing in 30, 60 days, but don't sit on this.
Yeah, a lot of times we've only got 10 days.
10 days of
10, maybe 15,
insurability,
yeah.
right? And I was just able to help a client over Martin Luther King holiday. She's like, we can't get insurance. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. In your particular situation, you can't. And I had to write a letter, and it was, they have to understand.
That's not an easy letter to write.
No.
I'm sure.
And then the clients, being a little bit older, don't understand, well, why are we insured, but why can't you get insurance on it?
Right.
It's a different situation. The market, even in the last 3-4 months, is different than what it was prior to that.
So just because somebody has current insurance on a home, if they're going to sell it, there's a possibility that the new owners may not be able to reach insurability.
That is 100% true for two reasons. If the current people, the sellers, are in the home, and they have had their insurance for a while, they could be locked into that insurability. So obviously your roof gets older time after year, right?
Sure.
So you're already locked in, like you're insurable because you didn't come to them with a 20-year-old roof.
Okay.
It was maybe 10 at the time. You've been there for 10 years and now it's 20 years old. You've done nothing with it. So it could be that scenario. Or like in flood insurance, we've had this where people had their insurance locked in pre the changing of flood maps, right? So
Yeah.
that then changes the scenario. But in addition to the property itself, it could be your buyers. So your buyers may have prior claims that's keeping them from insurance.
Oh. So if the buyer of the new house made some sort of a bogus claim 3 years ago against their insurance, that could keep them from...
Or
Yeah.
multiple
Okay.
claims. And that's why it's so important to have a
But
trusted...
you're saying the seller also, right? The one selling the house may have had a disposition of sorts. Does that affect the policy? Like the house itself has had a claim?
In some scenarios with some carriers, yes. But that is less of an issue.
Okay. That's good news.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is less of an issue.
Okay.
I feel like, so we bought our house in 2017, and not only have we done some major home improvements, we've done major property improvements, and then you bundle in all of the property value hikes
Oh, yeah.
in on that. I mean, and that in the grand scheme of things is what, 6 years ago. Okay. That's 5 years is like, whew, goes by real fast, right?
Yeah, no
Absolutely.
So
No comment.
You said 7 years went in a flash.
right. If how often should someone be checking? Like you said, you check your current clients every year, but let's say that somebody else has not had a review. Like I was shocked at basically what our property is valued at just by circumstances, not even like an actual appraisal or anything else like that. Like after talking to you, like, holy cow, we were underinsured.
Yeah. So in this market, with the inflation the way that it is, with materials going up 4 times, with labor costs going through the roof, right now, for the past since 2020, we have been shopping every year and finding drastic changes in rebuild values. Because again, if you buy your house at $200,000, that doesn't mean that it's going to cost $200,000 to rebuild. It may cost $300,000 to rebuild.
Especially if you bought your house at $200,000 6 years ago,
Right.
7 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely. It's
your
gonna
rebuild
cost
value
$320
is
or more.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So, I mean, we're seeing rebuild values. And of course, every market is a little bit different, but it's just shy of $200 a square foot. Is that right?
Wow.
So,
That sounds
Or
So,
more.
like-
That's or more. I mean,
Yeah,
we're looking at 250, 275, depending on. I mean, that's a lower level, build.
so
Go up
from
from there.
But more or less average.
Yeah.
so yeah, if I look at square footage of like a $1,500 house,
1,500 square foot.
1,500 square feet. Thank you. We are rebuild values coming in around 300,000.
that makes sense. I mean,
Yeah.
sale prices have gone up drastically too.
Yeah,
and I mean,
Right. You're seeing that every day, Dan.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah. Stuff that used to cost $120 a square foot now is, just a couple of years ago, it's now 180,
Right.
200, 220. Yeah. I mean, some of the new construction stuff is, 240, 250, 260, depending on how
Oh,
you trim it
yeah.
out. Yeah. I mean,
Right,
it's big.
It-
So
Yeah. So, and again, I mean, we never want anyone to fall short
yeah.
on if they do have that loss due to a fire or one of our biggest claims here in the Midwest, a tornado or a windstorm.
Hail.
Hail. Yeah.
Oh man, don't you cringe? It's like my car is not covered
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
like-
Yeah.
You go out and it looks like a piece of foil. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
And it's not like your car is the only one that got hit, so you know it's
Right.
going to be at least 4 to 6 months before.
well,
this
not
is
all of
fixed.
us have a fleet, Ashley. I mean,
I'm just saying.
Yeah, no kidding. Well, I mean, this has been some good stuff, and if you guys want to know more about your insurance, you want to check your insurance. What areas do you cover, Jaclyn?
Oh, so all of Missouri, all of Illinois, Tennessee, and Texas.
So if you're in those states, how can they get a hold of you to check it? Or, obviously you can't check somebody who's in Montana or Florida, but
Right.
They can ask the questions to their local person
Absolutely.
that we talked about. But if they want you specifically to check it, how do they get a hold of you?
Sure. So you can call or text me at 636-346-7021. I also have a website where you can input your information, and then I would follow up with you. That direct website is jaclyninsure.com. So that's JaclynInsureme.com.
Awesome. Well, guys, thanks for tuning in to this week's Close to Home podcast. Real people, real life, real stories. We'll catch you next week.